Hello everyone, tonight, we're starting somewhere. Most stories end in a hospital room, under flickering fluorescent lights with the sharp scent of antiseptic and that constant soft blip of a heart monitor echoing in the background. The room was cold, the kind of cold that clings to your bones, no matter how many scratchy blankets they pile on you. I remember hearing the sound before I could see anything of flatline. That long, dreadful tone that doesn't stop. People talk about seeing a bright light. I didn't. I heard a siren of sound, relentless and loud, until it was cut off by a jolt. I flatlined for 11 full seconds. Now 11 seconds doesn't sound like a lot unless you're on the wrong side of it. When I opened my eyes, the first face I saw was a nurse's. His name tag said Brian. Kind eyes. Slightly startled, like I'd caught him mid-thought. He looked like he wanted to say something, but wasn't sure if he was supposed to. You made it, he whispered, voice like someone trying not to wake a sleeping baby. My mouth was too dry to answer. I couldn't lift my hand. I tried. My chest felt like it had been punched from the inside. I blinked twice, then once more, slowly. That's how he knew I understood. That I was in there. He asked if I wanted to call someone. Anyone. But what he didn't know, and what I didn't know until he handed me the little note they'd left, was that my family was on vacation in Palm Springs. 12 days, the note said. Hope you're better when we get back. So I waited. Quietly, I healed alone. Now I'm not trying to sound noble. Healing hurts more when there's no one to tell you you're doing a good job. No one to bring flowers or sneak you an extra pudding from the cafeteria. Just sterile walls machines with beeping hearts of their own, and Brian. Always Brian. He was there every morning. Soft eyes, quick smile. One of those people you don't realize you need until you don't see them. That first night, I was half asleep when I overheard him whispering on the phone. I wasn't supposed to hear it, but I did. Yes, ma'am, she's stable now. Yeah, she's awake. Would you like to speak with her? There was a pause. Got it. Just thought you'd want to know. You know when something hurts more than pain? It's when you find out someone didn't even want to talk to you. Not even out of guilt. That ache in my chest came back sharper than the stroke itself. Now here's an old saying my grandmother used to mumble when her arthritis acted up. You don't know you're drowning until your feet stop touching the bottom. That week, I found out just how deep I'd been sinking. 8 days passed in the ICU. 8 long, clockless, flowerless, voiceless days. Not even a get-well-soon text. Brian was the only one who offered to push my wheelchair when they finally discharged me. He looked almost ashamed to be the one doing it, like he knew I deserved someone else. And then I went home. Or at least I thought I did. They dropped me off in one of those hospital vans that smell like vinyl and ammonia. I shuffled up to the porch and reached for the ceramic frog where I always hid the emergency key. Empty. I knocked. No answer. Sat outside for 20 minutes, breathing through the ache in my ribs and the weight of something I couldn't name yet. Then the door creaked open. Matt, my son-in-law, holding a Starbucks cup and looking like he'd seen a ghost. Oh, he muttered. We didn't think you'd be back so soon. Soon, I'd been gone for 2 strokes and 11 seconds of clinical death. He said the flight got delayed, that they were planning to stop by tomorrow. I stepped inside, and something in me froze. The house had changed. Not in a subtle way. No, the furniture had been moved, the walls half-painted. My wedding photos shoved into a box in the corner collecting dust like they were trash waiting for pickup. Right there on the dining table was a real estate flyer. My house! Charming southern home perfect for young families. Charming that home had held more sorrow and joy than any realtor could print on glossy paper. Then I saw the folder on the kitchen counter. Legal documents. Power of attorney. My signature dated 2 years back after a minor surgery. They told me it was just in case. Well, in case had arrived. Now here's a quirky little fact I once read. Dolphins have names. They use signature whistles to identify each other. Isn't that something even dolphins have the decency to call out for one another? Meanwhile, my own daughter was arranging my exit without even checking to see if I still had a pulse. I sat down at the kitchen table and reached for Luke's old iPad near the pantry. Miraculously still charged. Jenna hadn't logged out of her messages, and that's when I saw it. House goes on Monday. If she's not home yet, we start assisted living intake. Let's be real, Mom was never good at boundaries. That's what my daughter wrote. About me. Now there's a phrase people like to throw around these days, setting boundaries. And sure, that's healthy. But when your boundary is cutting off the woman who carried you through 5 colicky months and 3 teenage breakdowns, maybe check your definition. But I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I just got up, walked to the pantry, and pulled out the shoebox. The one where I kept my emergency cash. Then I grabbed the ledger I'd been updating since 1998, every password, every account, every quiet thread of my life. Because if they thought I was going to just lie down and wait for someone to fold me into a moving box labeled miscellaneous, they clearly forgot who taught them how to fight. The next morning, I waited. Travis left first off to some vague errand he hadn't bothered to invent with much detail. The moment the door clicked behind him, I moved. Not frantically, not like someone escaping, just deliberately. Like someone who knows exactly where everything they care about is and what to leave behind. The guest bedroom wasn't a guest bedroom anymore. It was a sorting zone. Half my clothes folded on the bed, some already shoved into those giant blue donation bags, like my life was being priced per pound. My dresser drawers empty. Not even a lavender sachet left behind. That was the moment it hit me. This wasn't confusion. This wasn't miscommunication. This was execution. They weren't getting ready to support my recovery. They were getting ready to erase me. So I went back to the iPad. My fingers moved fast for someone with 2 hospital wristbands still snug around her bones. I read every message. Every smug little update they shared with each other like this was a project plan. Josh had texted Megan from the airport, once Mom's house sells, we'll have room to breathe. Room to breathe? From what exactly? From the woman who worked double shifts after their father died, just to keep the lights on. From the woman who dipped into her 401k to bail Travis out when his artisan dog biscuit venture flopped. Or who babysat every summer so they could fly off to Miami and Key West and pretend they'd earned it all on their own. That woman? Here's a slice of old age wisdom handed down from my Aunt Jean, who survived 2 marriages and 1 tornado. If someone shows you they've moved on without you, don't chase the car. Let it drive. And that's exactly what I planned to do. But first, I needed to understand just how far they'd gone. I opened the folder again. This time, really read it. The power of attorney they used wasn't the basic one I remembered. It was a broader version, notarized during my hip surgery, the one Megan had shoved in front of me while I was still loopy from morphine, saying it was just for insurance paperwork. Of course I'd signed it. I was tired, medicated, and trusted her. What a cocktail. Now they were using that paper as a wrecking ball. So I called Eric Callahan, my old student, now an estate lawyer with a proper office, and that slow, careful tone lawyers use when they're trying not to sound horrified. "Hi, Eric," I said. "It's Diane Harris. I need you to hear something." He listened, didn't interrupt once. Then he said, "You're not the first Diane, but we can fight this." I felt something shift in my chest. Not anger, not relief, something steadier. Something like steel. Eric had me come in that very afternoon. We combed through every page, compared signatures, checked timestamps. And just as I suspected, the version of the document they were waving around didn't authorize them to sell real estate without my explicit consent. "They're overstepping," Eric said, tapping the paper with his pen. "But if we move fast, we can flip this whole thing." So we did. He filed a motion to revoke the power of attorney and restore my full legal rights. We called the realtor and pulled the listing. And just like that, I got my house back. But I didn't want to save it. I wanted to empty it before they did. That night, I stood in the doorway of the living room, the same one where we used to stack Christmas gifts around the fireplace and laugh about how bad Travis was at wrapping. I looked at the outline in the carpet where the couch used to be. I whispered just to myself, this is it. The last time I look back. Because I wasn't just leaving a house. I was leaving behind the idea that these people still knew me, still loved me, still counted me among their own. They didn't. And the most dangerous part, They truly believed I didn't have the strength to walk away first. So I didn't waste a single breath confronting them. What good would that do? They'd already tuned me out, already decided who I was, frail, confused, manageable. They forgot who taught them how to tie their shoes. Eric moved fast. In just 3 days, everything was in my name again. The locks were changed. The sale relisted my way. I left a message on the Ring doorbell for Travis. Come pick up your tools before I donate them. He showed up that night, didn't say a word. Just loaded his truck, left the gate swinging open behind him like he couldn't be bothered to close what he'd never opened with love. I didn't tell anyone where I was going, not even Eric. I sold everything except what mattered, some old photos, Mark's watch, a box of crayon drawings from when my girls still remembered how to say, I love you without an agenda. The house closed in 11 days. Cash buyer. No questions. I shut down every joint bank account, opened new ones under a name no one had access to. Grace Bennett. My grandmother's maiden name. Still me, just reborn. I cashed out what I could. Money orders in a locked pouch under the passenger seat of my car. That dusty old silver Corolla, the one nobody ever liked but me, it was the last thing I kept. Because it was invisible, like I'd become. And for the first time, that was a gift. Here's a fun little side note for you. Did you know that possums don't actually play dead on purpose? It's an involuntary reaction, a defense mechanism when they're overwhelmed. Their bodies just shut down. Their stillness isn't surrender. It's strategy. So maybe I wasn't giving up either. Maybe I was just doing what nature designed me for: surviving. The night before I left, I sat in the middle of the empty living room in a cheap folding chair with a peanut butter sandwich on a paper plate. I wrote 2 short letters, one to each daughter. No blame, no fury. Just, you showed me who you truly are. Thank you for the lesson. I left them on the kitchen counter, unplugged the fridge, took the spare key out of the ceramic frog one last time. By sunrise, I was gone, heading north on Route 81. No GPS, no playlist, just me, finally remembering what it felt like to put myself first. Not running. Removing myself. There's a difference. By the time I crossed into North Carolina, the sun was already leaning toward evening, casting that dusty golden hue across the trees that always makes me feel like the world's holding its breath. I'd burned through half a tank of gas, 3 cups of truck stop coffee, and surprisingly, not a single tear. Grief didn't follow me, not exactly. It just lingered behind like a shadow that lost its subject. Then I saw it, a billboard peeling at the edges, sticking out of the woods like it had been forgotten by time. Pine Grove Library. Friendliest place in Vermont. There was something about it that caught me like a whisper from someone who knew me better than I knew myself. I didn't question it. I turned off the next exit, drove another 6 hours, with nothing but the sound of tires on asphalt and the occasional hum of an old gospel station fading in and out. Pine Grove was one of those towns you only see on postcards or in movies, where someone's trying to escape the big city and learn the true meaning of life. Main Street had 2 stoplights, 1 bakery, and a bait shop that also sold fireworks and postcards of moose that probably hadn't lived in the area since the Reagan administration. I checked into a rundown motor inn with rooms that smelled like lemon cleaner and long-lost cigarettes. Paid in cash. Signed the guest book as Grace Bennett, retired librarian from Stillwater, Kentucky. Widowed. No children. Starting fresh. It rolled off the tongue easier than I expected. Nobody asked questions in a town that small. People figured you were running from something, and they respected you more for it. A man named Jim showed me a tiny trailer behind the bait shop, $580 a month, fully furnished, no lease if I paid in cash. You smoke? He asked. I shook my head. He shrugged. Then we're good. And that was that. The trailer smelled faintly of cedar and old coffee. The furniture was a little too floral, a little too saggy, but it felt like mine. I bought groceries at a family-owned market that still sold penny candy and rotary phones. Signed up for a library card under my new name and started shelving books there twice a week. Within 10 days, I was known as the quiet lady with the southern accent who remembered your birthday and asked about your dog before she asked your name. I didn't try to be memorable. I just tried to be present. That's how I met Hannah. She was 27, worked the breakfast shift at a diner that served blueberry pancakes with enough butter to make cardiologists sweat. She had tired eyes, a quick laugh, and a daughter named Rosie who stuck to me like a magnet from the first hello. By the end of the second week, Rosie started calling me Nana Grace. I never corrected her. When Hannah found out I used to teach, she asked if I'd help Rosie with her reading. I said yes before she finished the sentence. We worked our way through picture books and early readers, and by the end of month 1, Rosie was reading above grade level and beaming like she'd won the lottery. Now here's a little intellectual wisdom I picked up from a professor back in my college days. The mind is like a garden. Water the right things and beauty grows. Neglect it and weeds don't just thrive, they take over. That's what I tried to do with Rosie. Water the right things. Still, every night before bed, I'd slide open the drawer next to my pillow and pull out a slim black notebook. Every lie I told, I wrote it down. My birth year, where I went to college. The name of my late husband, I made one up, Albert Bennett, jazz trumpet player. It wasn't guilt, it was insurance. If anyone ever came asking, I wanted to remember who Grace was supposed to be. No Savannah, no Megan, no Travis. Just Grace in her little trailer by the marsh. But even in peace, the ghosts showed up. Some nights, I'd wake up gasping. Not from fear exactly. More like my body remembered dying, and sometimes it wanted to check if I was still alive. Nobody had come looking for me yet, but I knew it was only a matter of time. Back in Savannah, the fantasy I built in my head had them scrambling. And wouldn't you know it, it wasn't far off. The moment Megan stepped off that plane expecting to finalize her little transition plan, everything fell apart. She texted first. "Hey, we're back. Can we stop by tomorrow to go over logistics?" I didn't answer. When she pulled up to the house, she found the locks changed, the for sale sign gone, and the mailbox stuffed with final notices and account closure letters. Josh tried calling Eric. He shut that down fast. "I'm no longer authorized to discuss her affairs." That was all he said. When Megan showed up to his office, she didn't even get buzzed in. Travis tried sneaking around the back, probably hoping to catch a glimpse through a window. But the place was gutted, not a spoon left in the drawer. That night, they called the police and filed a missing persons report. Problem was, the detective assigned wasn't new. And he wasn't buying their urgency. Especially after Travis casually mentioned they'd been in Lake Tahoe while I was in the ICU. Worse, they admitted they hadn't visited once during my 8-day stay. Within 48 hours, Mrs. Adler, my neighbor, who always had binoculars and too much time, started whispering, then posting. Someone grabbed a real estate flyer and lined it up with my hospital discharge date. Another pulled public records showing my accounts had been closed before their plane even landed. Then it hit local Facebook groups. Anyone know where Miss Harris went? Her family listed her house while she was in critical care. The comments exploded. People shared screenshots. A woman posted, "She used to bring my mom soup when she was sick. This is how they repay her." The outrage spread fast. Then, a local reporter showed up on their lawn. Then a regional one. By the time it hit national news, the headline had morphed into something sinister. "A mother disappears. Did her family try to erase her?" Suddenly, Megan was being heckled in the grocery store parking lot. Josh choked back tears in a news interview, mumbling, "We thought she was okay. We never imagined she'd just disappear." Nobody was buying it. Someone clipped the interview and posted it on TikTok with a remix of Megan's voice layered over shots of Palm Springs pools and spa menus. They called it the Vacation Vultures. I watched it all from Hannah's old laptop, hidden in my trailer, wrapped in a blanket with Rosie's crayon drawing of a sun pinned to my fridge. And I'll be honest, I didn't feel vindicated. I felt invisible, safe. And for the first time in my entire life, I didn't owe anybody a single thing. It had been nearly 2 months since I left Savannah. 2 full months of small-town mornings of folding laundry, while birds warbled outside the window, of afternoons at the library with the smell of old paper and lemon polish, of Rosie's voice calling out Nana look at least 14 times a day. I had a rhythm, not a routine, exactly, more like a heartbeat that finally beat just for me. No deadlines, No one calling to ask where I was. No passive-aggressive texts about family obligations. I had started to believe just maybe the world had moved on. The headlines faded. The TikToks stopped trending. My name hadn't been mentioned in a week, maybe 2. It felt like freedom. Like I had slipped between the cracks of the world and found a pocket of light. Most mornings, I volunteered at the library. Afternoons, I helped Hannah pick up shifts by watching Rosie, who now introduced me to everyone as my Nana Grace. The name never stopped catching me off guard, but I didn't flinch anymore. When Rosie's 7th birthday rolled around, we decorated the town center's event room with mismatched dollar store streamers, paper plates with cartoon bears, and pizza that came in boxes too big for the fridge. It was simple, nothing Pinterest-worthy, but it was perfect. At some point, Rosie asked me to sit beside her while she opened her presents. Someone handed me a party hat, and I wore it without thinking. I passed her cards, helped her sound out the words. I even smiled in a few photos. One of the moms, young blonde, always recording things for Instagram, filmed a 30-second clip of Rosie opening her big gift, a glittery pink scooter. The camera caught the whole moment, Rosie squealing me, steadying the box, her arms flinging around my neck. Nothing special, just a sweet birthday memory. Except 3 days later, while I was shelving books in the back corner of the library, Hannah came tearing in her phone in her hand like it was on fire. "Grace," she said, breathless. "You need to see this, right now." I looked down at her screen and felt the world tilt. That little video had been reposted by a mommy blog, then picked up by a TikTok account. They'd cross-referenced the birthday footage with old screenshots from the Savannah story. "Found her grandma ghost is alive in Vermont." That's what the caption said. My stomach sank. The video had already racked up 900,000 views. The comments were pouring in faster than Hannah could scroll. Some were kind, calling me a hero, a legend, a genius for escaping. Others were vicious, accusing me of faking everything, of being a cruel, manipulative old woman who abandoned her real family. Worse yet, the video tagged the name of the town. My location was out. I collapsed behind the returns desk, knees giving out like they did that day in the kitchen. Heart thumping wild and hollow, like it was searching for a door that wasn't there. Hannah crouched beside me, confused, but calm. "What's going on?" she whispered. I looked her straight in the eyes. "My name's not Grace," I said quietly. "It's Diane. Diane Harris. I didn't run away from my family. I escaped them." She didn't flinch, didn't gasp. She just nodded. "Okay," she said, her voice steady. "So what do we do now?" That's when I knew hiding forever was no longer an option. Not because I was ready, but because someone was going to come. That night, I didn't sleep. Not because I was scared, but because I didn't want to waste a second pretending I was still safe. By morning, the video had crossed 1 million views. People were tagging true crime channels, speculating about elder abuse, inheritance fraud, fake deaths. Some accused me of orchestrating the whole thing as a revenge stunt. Funny, isn't it? How quick the world flips you from victim to villain the moment you take your power back. I turned off the Wi-Fi, cleared the browser history, packed everything I owned into 2 duffel bags just in case. Then it happened. Outside the library, a silver Toyota with Georgia plates crept through the parking lot. Slow, steady, like a shark in shallow water. I didn't need to see the driver. I knew it was Sarah. There was something about the way she parked. Too careful, too symmetrical. Like she still thought a gold star might fix it. She stepped out in jeans and a cardigan, held a paper coffee cup like it was a shield. Her hair was pulled back, no makeup, face pale and tired. She looked like someone who hadn't slept in weeks. She stood by the library entrance for 5 minutes. Didn't knock, didn't call, just waited. I watched from behind the nonfiction shelf. My hands trembled slightly on the spine of a large print mystery novel. Finally, I stepped outside. She saw me and froze. Eyes wide, lips parted. Her shoulders caved in like they wanted to fold around her heart. She didn't speak at first, just stared. Then finally, "Mom," she whispered. "Please don't walk away." Her voice cracked on Mom, and for a moment, a split second, some old instinct flickered in me. the urge to comfort, to fix, but I didn't move. She stepped closer, cautious, like I might bolt. "You're not a ghost," she said. "You're not done. You can come home." I looked her in the eye and said with a voice steady as stone, "I already had the funeral. You just didn't come." She flinched, like I'd slapped her. I thought she might start listing excuses, blaming Travis, or Megan, or the calendar, or the air. But she didn't. She just stood there, eyes glistening. "We didn't know," she whispered. We thought we were helping." I let out a laugh, sharp, dry, not cruel, just true. "You left me to die alone in a hospital," I said. "And when I didn't, you tried to box me up like a worn-out recliner." She winced. "I didn't know how to deal with watching you get weak," she murmured. "It scared me." "Everything scares you," I replied. "But you never let that stop you before." She started crying. Real tears this time. No cameras, no statement rehearsals. And I let her. I let her sit in it. Then I said, "I'm not coming back, Sarah. I found something better." She nodded slowly, even as her face crumpled. I turned around and walked away. Not fast. Not dramatic, just steady. The kind of walk that says this isn't a scene. This is closure. 3 days later, a plain manila envelope showed up in the library's return drop box. No stamp, no return address. Just my name, Grace, written in a handwriting I knew better than my own. Sarah's. I stared at it for a long time. Didn't touch it. Just stood there holding someone else's overdue copy of The Secret Life of Bees, while the envelope sat like a ghost in the drop bin. I brought it home, laid it on the kitchen table, and left it there. 2 nights went by. I didn't open it. Every time I passed it, my heart did that small, painful jump, like it wasn't sure whether it wanted to be forgiven or left alone. On the 3rd night, I made a cup of tea. I didn't drink, sat in the squeaky old kitchen chair, and tore it open. Inside was a folded piece of hospital paper, the kind with faint blue lines and emergency contact info printed at the top. On the back, in my own messy handwriting, I recognized something I hadn't seen since the ICU. "If I don't wake up, it read, just know I already forgave you. But if I do, please come. I'm scared." I remembered writing that. Every letter. My hand trembling. Brian standing by the door pretending not to notice. I'd asked him to make sure it got to them if I didn't make it. Apparently, he slipped it into my bag. No one looked until I was already gone. Sarah had found it probably while rifling through whatever was left in the house. She must have read it and decided it was worth sending back to me like it still had something to offer. Or maybe she just wanted me to remember I'd once asked for them. But it didn't break me. I read it twice. Then I folded it up and slid it into the notebook where I'd kept all of Grace's lies next to the line that said no contact equals peace. I didn't cry, didn't clutch the paper or whisper anyone's name. Just sat with the quiet. The next morning, Megan emailed the library. I had no idea how she got the address. Her message was short. "I'd like to come. Just once. No Travis, no cameras, just me." I stared at it a long time. I didn't know what I wanted from her. Maybe nothing. Maybe just to see her face when she realized I wasn't the weak, predictable woman they'd planned to stage out of the frame. Eventually, I typed back, "1 visit, that's it, bring the letter with you." When Hannah got home that night, I told her Megan was coming. She didn't say much, just nodded. "You want me there?" she asked. "No," I said. "This one's mine." We agreed to meet at the cemetery just outside of town. I picked it for a reason. It was quiet, neutral, honest. Nobody lies near people who can't argue back. I was already sitting on the old wooden bench next to Mark's headstone when Megan arrived. She was dressed like she was heading to church, white blouse, clean jeans, shoes completely wrong for gravel. She carried a soft canvas tote bag that looked like it had been clutched all the way from Savannah. For a second, I saw her as she once was, teenager, in a hospital waiting room holding my hand while we waited for the doctor to say something hopeful. She didn't say hello, just sat down a few feet away like she was leaving room for a wall between us. She handed me the envelope. Inside was the same ICU letter, but this time it was marked up. Scribbles in blue pen filled the margins, her responses, her reactions. We didn't know it was that serious. I thought Sarah would go. I'm sorry, Mom. I was scared. It wasn't eloquent, wasn't neat, but it was honest. I let the paper rest in my lap and stared out at the trees beyond the cemetery fence. They were starting to turn edges, curling into gold and rust. Fall was arriving quiet and steady, like something you don't notice until it wraps around your shoulders. You think I don't hate myself? Megan asked suddenly. Her voice was low, tight. You think I sleep at night? I looked at her. I think you sleep better than I did, I said, wondering why my daughters couldn't bother to hold my hand while I bled in a hospital bed. That broke her. She turned her face away and sobbed into her hands, not loud, not for show, just raw. The kind of grief that doesn't ask permission. We were selfish, she said, voice splintering. We thought we had more time. I looked at Mark's headstone and replied, so did he. We sat in silence. A long one? No birds chirping, no breeze, just stillness. Finally I spoke. You and Sarah are grown women. You made a choice. And now the world's seen what that choice looked like. You don't get to rewrite it. She nodded, bit her bottom lip, wiped her cheeks with a tissue she pulled from her tote like it was a premeditated sin. Can I visit again? She asked. No. Can I write? You can send letters, I said, to Hannah's P.O. box. But I'm not making any promises. When we stood, she reached for a hug. I stepped back, not out of anger. Just clarity. That part of me, I said, pointing gently to my chest, you already buried. And this time, I got to choose the funeral. She didn't argue. Didn't try again. Just nodded like someone who finally understood. She left the cemetery quietly, the sound of her heels crunching gravel, the only goodbye. I sat there for a while longer, hands folded in my lap, the ICU letter still crinkled beside me. Then I whispered something only Mark could hear. Would have been nice to have you through this. The breeze finally picked up, soft, forgiving. I walked back to the trailer, pulled out my notebook, and wrote one last letter. Not to Megan, or Sarah, or even to Mark. To me. You did it. That's what I wrote at the top. Simple, honest, true. After I wrote you did it at the top of the page, I sat back and stared at it like it was written by someone else. Someone braver. Someone I hadn't met until all the noise was stripped away. The trailer was still save for the low hum of the old fridge and the creak of the wind nudging the window screen. Then I made 2 columns. Nothing fancy. Just a pencil and the quiet honesty that comes when you've run out of ways to lie to yourself. The first column titled, What I Left Behind. A house that no longer smelled like home. A name that stopped feeling like mine. Children who made decisions about my life like I was already gone. A kitchen once filled with laughter, now emptied by silence. My place at the table, both literal and otherwise. And in the second column, what I gained. Mornings that belonged only to me. A child's trust, earned, not expected. Evenings with laughter that didn't carry guilt. A name that I chose. A life that felt soft again. At the bottom of the page, I drew a simple line between the two. I looked at both sides. And then, just under the last entry I wrote, it was worth it. I folded the page and tucked it into the notebook I kept under the bed, alongside my new identity, my passwords, and a lifetime's worth of small reinventions. On the envelope, I wrote Grace Bennett, not just because it was my new name, but because I had grown into it like a pair of worn-in shoes, familiar, fitting. That afternoon, the sun spilled through the kitchen window in golden ribbons, and Hannah asked if I wanted to help trim the hedges. I said yes, not because I liked gardening, but because I was tired of staying small. We clipped and bagged, laughed about how overgrown the marigolds had gotten, and then I heard the sound of tiny feet pattering across the gravel. Nana, Nana, look. Rosie came flying around the corner, clutching a chipped little seashell in her hand like it was a pearl. I kneeled down, no hesitation this time, and held out my palm. Well, now that's just about the prettiest seashell I've ever seen. Let's build a castle with it, she said. And so we did. Just the two of us hunched over in the soft patch of sand behind the trailer, shaping wet dirt into crooked towers with a plastic spoon and the bottom of an old takeout container. She jabbed the shell right into the top, proud as anything. It kept falling. She kept laughing. "That's okay," she giggled. "We can make it again." And you know that stuck with me. Kids don't worry about permanence the way adults do. They build it crumbles, and they build again. Maybe we're the fools forever thinking we could make anything that would last forever. That night, after Rosie had gone home and the trailer was quiet again, I pulled out my little notebook of lies. I flipped to the last page. Scrawled in the corner, I wrote, "We don't disappear. We change shapes." Then I tucked it back under the mattress and turned off the light. Here's a quirky little fact: flamingos aren't actually born pink. They turn that color over time because of what they eat. In other words, they become what they absorb. That thought gave me pause, because maybe I wasn't always this version of myself. Maybe I used to be all sharp edges and trying too hard. But over time, through loss and silence and small acts of rebellion, I'd become pinker, softer, and oddly stronger because of it. I didn't check my name online anymore. Didn't scroll the headlines. Didn't look for updates about Megan or Sarah or the mess they'd left behind in Savannah. But letters came. Megan sent the first, short, no return address, just, "Rosie reminds me of when I was 7. You used to say I sparkled when I laughed." I didn't answer. A week later, another letter. "I still have your green cardigan. I wear it on hard days." No response from me. Then a third. "We hurt you. I know that now. We thought we were being practical. We were just being cowards." I sat with that one. Read it 3 times. Didn't forgive her, but didn't tear it up either. I slid the letters into the back of my notebook behind the maps and false starts and receipts from small diners where no one knew my name. That's where they belonged. Not in my heart, not in my breath. Just filed away. That Sunday, Rosie and I went to the pier, like we did most weekends. She brought crackers for the seagulls. I brought a thermos of tea, and my hands now steady enough to pour without spilling. We didn't talk much. We just watched the water. She rested her head against my arm and whispered, "Nana, did you ever have a mom?" I did. Was she nice? I thought about it. "She was strong," I said. "Sometimes strong doesn't always look nice." Rosie nodded, like she understood more than she let on. Later that day, Hannah joined us. She laid a quilt down on the wooden boards and stretched her legs out. The wind pulled at her ponytail. Rosie curled up on her lap and started humming something low and sweet. "I don't know what your story was before," Hannah said, looking out at the bay, "but I hope you know this one's better." And I believed her. I truly did. Not because it erased what came before, but because it didn't have to. Some people mark time in holidays. Some use school years or birthdays or seasons. But I started measuring mine by Saturdays with Rosie and quiet Sunday mornings at the pier. That's how I knew life had changed. I stopped dreading the calendar. Most mornings, I woke before sunrise, made a single slice of toast, and listened to the town wake up. Pine Grove had a sound to it. Not silence, exactly, more like a sleepy hum. The coffee shop grinding beans, a distant screen door creaking open. Someone's dog barking at nothing in particular. It was all so soft. And then just like that, the softness snapped. Because one Tuesday afternoon, as I was reshelving the large print mysteries at the library, Hannah burst through the front doors, eyes wide, phone shaking in her hand. "Grace," she said, panting, "you need to see this." She turned the screen toward me. Another video? Another viral post. Not the birthday clip. Something new. This one was worse. Someone had stitched together footage from Rosie's birthday, a blurry image of me helping her unwrap a present alongside a screenshot from one of the news reports about my disappearance. Then came old photos, me on the porch back in Savannah, holding Sarah as a baby. Someone had really done their digging. The caption, "Grandma Ghost is alive, new name, new life, new family." I didn't speak. I couldn't. It was like my heart folded in on itself. The video had been shared across multiple platforms. Millions of views. Commenters accusing me of everything from faking a medical emergency to orchestrating an elaborate revenge escape. Some praised me. Others called me cruel, selfish, a fraud. They debated me like I was a fictional character. And then came the worst part. Someone tagged the town, Pine Grove, Vermont. My location was out. I dropped to the floor behind the returns desk, knees too weak to carry the weight of old wounds cracking open again. Hannah knelt next to me, one hand on my back. "What is this?" she whispered. I met her eyes. "My name's not Grace," I said, voice barely above a breath. "It's Diane. Diane Harris. I didn't run away from my family. I escaped them." She stared at me. I braced myself for a reaction, a question, a flinch, a retreat. But she just nodded. No dramatics, no theatrics. "Okay," she said. "So what do we do now?" That night, I didn't sleep. I packed everything I owned into 2 duffel bags just in case I had to leave again. I didn't want to, but the past had found me. And it doesn't knock gently. By morning, my trailer looked exactly the same, but I was back in survival mode. Wired, cold. The world was back to telling my story for me. But then I saw it. A silver Toyota with Georgia plates, creeping past the library, slowing down, stopping, parking. I didn't need to see her face. I knew. Sarah. She stepped out, looking hollow and tired. Like the guilt had finally landed on her bones. She wore a cardigan too big for her frame, her hair pulled back like she was trying to look respectable. She held a paper cup of coffee in both hands, like it might keep her from falling apart. She didn't see me at first. She just stood by the library steps, waiting. I watched from behind the shelves, counted to 60, then stepped out. She looked up and froze. "Mom," she whispered, "please don't walk away." Her voice cracked on Mom. That name didn't hit me like it used to. It didn't sting. It just sounded distant. Like a song I used to know the words to. She stepped closer. "You're not a ghost," she said softly. "You're not done. You can come home." I looked right at her and said calmly, like I'd rehearsed it in my sleep, "I already had the funeral. You just didn't come." She winced. "I didn't know," she said. "We didn't know it would go that far." I laughed once, sharp and humorless. "You left me to die in a hospital, Sarah. And when I didn't, you tried to sell my house and shove me into a nursing home like old luggage. I thought we were helping." "No," I said. "You were helping yourselves. Don't call it love if it only works when I'm silent." She began to cry. Not loudly, not for attention. Just real tears falling like they'd been held back too long. "I didn't know how to watch you be weak," she admitted. I panicked. We all did. I took a step forward. You know what real strength looks like, showing up. Sitting beside someone when they can't speak. Holding a hand. "You didn't do any of that?" "None of you did." She nodded, shoulders shaking. "I'm not coming back," I said. "I found something better." And I meant it. Not something perfect, not a fantasy, but something better. Peace. A chance to breathe without asking permission. She stepped back. "Can I visit again?" "No." "Can I write?" I hesitated. "You can send letters," I said, "to Hannah's P.O. box, but I'm not promising I'll read them." She looked like she wanted to say more. Maybe something rehearsed, but she didn't. Instead, she nodded, quietly, then turned and walked away. No hug, no big scene. Just a woman learning too late what it feels like to be on the other side of goodbye. That night, I made another list. Not in a notebook this time, just in my head. Things I needed. A calm morning. Rosie's laughter tea with extra honey, forgiveness eventually, but not today. As I slipped into bed, I looked out the window. The stars above Pine Grove blinked like they knew all my secrets and didn't mind keeping them. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't dream about being found. I dreamed about staying. The next few weeks passed like fog lifting slowly off a lake. No dramatic shifts, no sharp turns. Just a quiet kind of settling. I didn't move. Didn't pack. I stayed right there in that trailer tucked behind the bait shop, breathing in the Vermont air like it owed me nothing and gave me everything. No more surprise cars outside the library. No more urgent knocks. Just the sound of life returning to its low hum. Every now and then, a new letter would arrive in Hannah's P.O. box. Neatly written. Always signed, Love, Megan. She never pushed. She never asked for answers. She just told me about her day. about her son starting swim lessons, about how Sarah had started therapy, about the way she missed my fried chicken, and how she still couldn't figure out how I kept it crispy. I didn't write back, but I didn't throw them away either. They lived in a shoebox now beside Rosie's drawings and the photo of my daughters from when they were still small enough to fit in my arms and light enough to carry to bed after falling asleep in front of the TV. Every time I opened that box, it was like flipping through a life that might have belonged to someone else. And yet, it was mine. One Thursday afternoon, I was restocking biographies at the library when Jim, the man who rented me the trailer, wandered in with a slow grin and a suspiciously formal tone. "You hear about the church," he said, like it was a secret only the wallpaper should know. I hadn't. Apparently, a historical society out of Montpellier was poking around the old chapel on the hill. Something about a preservation grant and hidden tunnels. He was thrilled. Said it meant maybe finally putting Pine Grove on the map. I smiled politely and nodded, but my mind was somewhere else. Tunnels, secrets beneath the floorboards, buried things. It sounded too familiar, not in the literal sense, but in that strange, poetic kind of way. Because while they were busy unearthing brick and stone, I had been excavating something else. Myself. Now here's a piece of wisdom passed down from Miss Lorraine, the librarian, who trained me when I was just 19. People think you go to libraries to find stories. But really, you go to lose them. To set down what you've carried too long and borrow something lighter for a while. That's what Pine Grove had become, my borrowed story. Grace Bennett, retired librarian, soft-spoken and kind. She made sweet tea the old-fashioned way and never forgot your birthday. She loved crossword puzzles and porch swings and didn't talk much about where she came from, and nobody asked. Except Rosie. Kids always ask. One evening, while we were baking cornbread together, her idea, my disaster. She turned to me, flour dusted on her nose, and asked, "Nana, are you ever gonna go home?" I didn't flinch, didn't lie. I just wiped my hands on a towel and said, "I already am home." She nodded, thought about it, then asked if we could make pancakes next. That's the beautiful thing about kids. They don't care where you came from as long as you're here now. Around that time, Hannah started asking if I wanted to come with them on their Sunday drives. Just little adventures, farmers markets, pumpkin patches, a town 3 miles over, with the best apple cider donuts this side of the Green Mountains. I started saying yes, and each yes felt like a stitch, sewing me into this new life, one gentle loop at a time. At one little roadside stand, Rosie picked out a gourd shaped like a duck and named it Quackers. She made me carry it all afternoon like it was royalty. Another day, we ended up at a small craft fair where a woman with silver braids and a crooked smile was selling handmade journals. "Pick one?" Hannah said, nudging me. I did. Leather-bound, soft to the touch, with pages that smelled faintly like cedar. That night, I opened it and wrote one sentence. "This life isn't borrowed anymore." I didn't write much after that. Just little things. Things Rosie said. Recipes that worked. Recipes that didn't. Things I felt but couldn't quite say aloud. One night, I flipped through the journal and realized it had become something else. Not a record of escape. A record of presence. Proof that I had stopped vanishing. And just when I started to believe this little world might hold another letter came. But not to me. To the library. Typed. Plain. Addressed to the director of the Pine Grove Public Library. It was from a media company. A documentary producer. They were doing a piece on online narratives that shaped the cultural conversation. And wouldn't you know it, my story had made the shortlist. They wanted to visit, interview the locals, possibly talk to Grace Bennett. I stared at the letter a long time, then folded it up and stuck it in the drawer beside the reference desk beneath a stack of old bookmarks and lost and found reading glasses. I didn't tell anyone. Not Hannah, not Rosie, not even Jim. Because it was a reminder the world wasn't done trying to tell my story for me. But I was. Here's something I once read in a dusty book about Appalachian folklore. Sometimes the only way to hold on to yourself is to become someone new in a place no one's looking. And I think that's what I had done. Not to hide, but to protect. To protect the version of me who could laugh again. The version who made pancakes with a child who loved me without needing a DNA test. The version who knew that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is stay. Not run,
Not fight.
just stay and breathe. And know that you're finally where you belong. The night the letter came, I couldn't sleep. I wasn't scared, at least not in the way I had been back in Savannah. This was a different kind of fear. Not sharp and immediate, but low and slow, like the hum of a refrigerator you don't notice until it shuts off. I sat up in bed, journal in my lap, trying to decide if I should tell Hannah about the producer. But what would I say? Hey, remember how I used to be a ghost on the internet? Well, the people with cameras want to come and film me pretending to be real. No, that wasn't going to happen. So, I tucked the letter back into the drawer under the library desk the next morning. Let it stay buried like the part of me it tried to resurrect. Let someone else tell the tale. Instead, I turned my attention back to the life I had, the one with Rosie's hand in mine, and the comfort of being just one face in a small, sleepy town. Fall came in properly that week. The kind of cold that doesn't ask permission, just walks in and takes your chair. Leaves crunching underfoot, wood smoke in the air, scarves pulled tighter. Pine Grove felt different in autumn, like a town with secrets it only whispers when the sky goes gray. And that's when the nightmares came back. Not every night, but enough to make me keep the hallway light on again. In the dreams, I was back in the ICU. But it wasn't just the hospital, it was the feeling. That flat-lined silence, that sudden jolt in my chest. Only this time, I wasn't waking up. I was watching myself stay dead. Sometimes Sarah would be standing over me shrugging. Other times, it was Megan painting over the walls of my house, roller in hand, humming while she erased every trace of me. I'd wake up gasping, and then I'd hear it, Rosie's little voice through the thin trailer wall, whispering to her stuffed bear, making up bedtime stories. That sound anchored me. So I started writing them down. Her stories. The one about the flying dog who only barked when someone lied. The bear that could shrink small enough to fit in your pocket and scare away nightmares. The grumpy tea kettle who just needed someone to listen. They were wild and sweet and made no sense, and I wrote everyone down in the back pages of my journal. Because one day, she'll grow up, and I want her to know that her voice mattered even before she knew how much. Here's a side note for you, the scent of old books. It has a name, bibliosmia. It comes from the breakdown of lignin in the paper, similar to vanillin, the same compound in vanilla. That soft, warm smell of pages turning, it's chemistry pretending to be comfort. I think people are like that too. 1,000 little breakdowns that somehow add up to something that smells like home. One afternoon, Rosie and I were coloring together when she suddenly asked, "Do I have any other grandmas?" The question felt like a pin to the chest. I paused, took a breath.
Not ones like me, I said.
She nodded, seemed fine with that. Then she asked, "Did you ever get hurt?" I looked at her, so small in that oversized cardigan she'd pulled from Hannah's laundry basket.
Yeah, I said, I did.
Did it get better?
I could have said yes,
but I didn't. Instead, I said I got stronger. She nodded again. Like Rosie the rhino, she whispered, referencing one of her imaginary animal characters. She had a crack in her horn, but she still charged the clouds.
Exactly, kid, exactly.
That night, I stood at the window with a cup of tea in hand and watched the moon hover above the marsh. It looked like a coin flipped heads up, a kind of quiet victory. I thought about the producers again. I thought about the internet still chewing on my story like it was gum that hadn't lost flavor yet. Let them chew. Let them argue and speculate and remix my pain into punchlines. I wasn't theirs anymore. I belonged to no headline.
No algorithm. No one's TikTok redemption arc.
Just here.
In Pine Grove, where no one asked for my past and everyone brought their own thermos to the farmer's market.
The next morning, I walked Rosie to school. She held my hand the whole way, swinging it slightly, skipping on the cracks like it was a game only she knew the rules to. When we reached the gate, she let go and turned around.
"You're coming back right."
"Always," I said.
And meant it.
That afternoon, Hannah surprised me with a framed photo. It was a snapshot from the pumpkin patch. Rosie in mid-laugh, half-eaten apple in hand. Me in the background, arms crossed, face soft in the way it only gets when you're not performing for anyone.
"I thought you might want this," Hannah said.
I held it for a long time. A little scared of it, but I took it home and placed it on the nightstand right beside the notebook. That's the funny thing about photos. The ones that matter sneak up on you. They're not the posed ones. Not the birthday cakes or graduation caps. They're the ones taken when you weren't trying. When you were just being, living, belonging. The days started getting shorter. You know the kind where the sun taps out before dinner, and you're left with a living room bathed in that blue-gray light that makes everything feel quieter than it is. Pine Grove started winding down early too. Porch lights flicked on at 4:30. The bait shop closed by 6. And at the library, fewer people came in. Just a handful of regulars and a young couple planning a winter wedding who kept whispering in the romance section like they were inventing love for the first time. I liked it. The slowing down, the hush. There's something peaceful about being part of a town that's not trying to be anything other than what it is. Then one night, Sheriff Clay showed up. Now you should know Pine Grove's sheriff isn't like the ones on TV. He's about 70 walks with a limp from falling off a roof in '89 and smells like menthol and maple syrup. Clay doesn't talk unless he needs to, and when he does, it usually comes with a story about a cousin you've never met and a weather pattern that's only happened twice since Nixon. He found me restocking the children's section. Grace, he said with a slow nod. Got a minute? I followed him outside. We stood by his cruiser under a flickering lamppost, while the wind played with the hem of my cardigan. You got family down south, he asked. My heart stopped. Just for a second. I nodded. A long time ago. He rubbed the back of his neck. Someone's been calling around, he said, asking questions. I felt my stomach sink. Name, I asked, though I already knew. He handed me a slip of paper, a Georgia number. No name attached. Didn't say much. Just that they were looking for someone who used to be Diane Harris. Said she might have started over up here. Didn't push it. But folks like that, they circle. I held the paper like it might bite me. Clay looked at me, really looked. Anything you want to tell me? And here it was, the moment where the curtain lifts and the audience waits to see if the magician really made it out alive. I took a breath. And for the first time, I told the truth, almost all of it, about Savannah, the hospital, the power of attorney, the house that stopped being mine, the daughters who stood by and watched me disappear, and the morning I decided to stop waiting to be rescued. Clay listened, didn't interrupt once. When I finished, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a roll of peppermint lifesavers. Offered me one. Sounds like they lost something they didn't know they had, he said, unwrapping his own. And you. Sounds like you found something you didn't think you'd ever get back. What's that, I asked? He popped the candy into his mouth. Yourself. That night I couldn't sleep. But not from fear. From clarity. Sarah was looking for me again. Maybe Megan too. And this time, they were digging quietly. Not with reporters or viral TikToks, but with calls to town halls, local post offices, maybe even public libraries. They were doing the kind of search that doesn't want attention. Which told me one thing, they weren't trying to fix their reputation. They were trying to fix something else. Maybe guilt, maybe regret. But it didn't matter, because I wasn't waiting for that knock anymore. The next day, I found Rosie in the kitchen lining up jelly beans by color. Want to help me make a jelly bean snake? She asked. Only if I get to eat the head. Deal. We built it together inch by inch across the countertop. When it was done, she stared at it proud. You know, she said, if anyone's mean to you, I can bite 'em. I laughed genuinely, that loud kind of laugh that comes from deep in the chest. Thanks, kiddo. I'll keep that in mind. There's this phrase people love tossing around in arguments, blood is thicker than water. But what most people don't realize is that the original version is the opposite. It goes, the blood of the covenant is thicker than the water of the womb. In other words, chosen family can be stronger than the one you're born into. Rosie wasn't my granddaughter by blood, but by every other measure, she was mine. That weekend, I asked Hannah if I could take Rosie on a little trip. Nothing far, just a drive. Of course, she said. She loves being with you. So on Saturday morning, we packed PB&J sandwiches, filled up the gas tank, and hit the road with no real destination. Just the radio, the open sky, and the hum of tires on old roads. Somewhere past the county line, we pulled over at a scenic overlook. The mountains stretched out before us, like someone had painted them just for us. Rosie climbed onto the wooden fence and held her arms out wide. I feel like a bird, she yelled. You are a bird, I said, leaning against the railing. The world just hasn't caught up yet. She giggled. Maybe I'm a ghost bird. I froze a little at that, not because she meant anything by it. Just how strange that a 7-year-old could say something so close to the truth. I had been a ghost, floating between rooms, between names, between lives. But not anymore. Now I was something else, something solid. That night, I wrote a new line in my journal. They may find me one day, but they won't find who they left behind. A few days later, the leaves started falling in earnest. Golden curls and red confetti twisting down onto sidewalks and porches, like the whole town had agreed to get a little softer, a little quieter. I started keeping the windows open, more just enough for the smell of wood smoke to drift in with the breeze. There's a kind of magic in autumn that makes you feel like time isn't chasing you anymore. It's just walking beside you. That week, something strange happened. The Rosewood house, which had sat empty since before I arrived, suddenly looked different. It wasn't for sale. No contractors had been by. But one day, the porch lights were on. The next, the shutters were painted. Then the gutters cleared. Grass trimmed. Someone or something was fixing it. Problem was, no one had seen anyone go in or come out. Jim at the bait shop joked it was ghost equity. Mrs. Dowling at the diner said it was probably those TikTok folks back again. But the real talk started at the library when a local history buff named Ruth Ann stopped in with a stack of articles and a flashlight. She leaned over the checkout counter and whispered, "You ever notice that house rebuilds itself every 10 years? I blinked. What? Rosewood, oldest house in Pine Grove. Burned in 58, rebuilt by 69, then empty again. Boarded in 79, reopened in 89, then abandoned again. Always seems to fix itself, right before the first snow." Now, I'm not one to jump at ghost stories, but even I felt a chill. Curious, I walked past it on my way home, and sure enough, the windows were clean. There were fresh flowers in a pot near the steps. I didn't dare go up the path, but I stood there long enough to feel it, that eerie sense you're being watched. Not in a threatening way, just noticed. That night, Rosie asked if I believed in haunted houses. I stirred her hot cocoa and said, "Some houses aren't haunted. They're just tired of being forgotten." She tilted her head. Like people. Exactly like people. Later, I told Hannah about it. Half as a joke, half as a warning. She smirked. Maybe it's the universe reminding you not everything that disappears stays gone. Funny, because the very next morning, I got another letter. This one wasn't from Megan. It was from Travis. Typed, signed, cold. He'd seen the new videos. Had serious concerns about public misrepresentation. Claimed the family was being slandered by omission. Said his business was suffering. Then, the kicker. We are exploring legal options if this story continues to circulate without clarification. I laughed so hard I nearly choked on my tea. The man who tried to sell my house while I was in the ICU now wanted to sue me for, what? Not being dead enough. I didn't respond. Just slipped the letter into the trash between 2 coupons and a flyer for chimney sweep services. But I felt the wave rising. A storm low and distant rumbling back from the past. And sure enough, by the end of the week, a local journalist emailed the library. Said she was doing a follow-up piece on elder autonomy and the growing trend of women over 60 disappearing from their families. "We'd love to speak with Ms. Grace Bennett," she wrote. "Her story inspired a lot of people. It would mean the world." I sat with that email open for an hour, then closed it. No reply. Let them wonder. Let them piece together what they think happened from crumbs and TikToks and the opinion of a man like Travis. Because the truth, it doesn't belong to them. It lives here in this trailer. In the quiet mornings and the jelly bean snakes and the laughter that doesn't need translation. In the way Rosie slips her hand into mine without asking, just because she wants to be near. That weekend, I took her to the annual Pine Grove Harvest Fair. We wore matching scarves, entirely her idea. Ate too much kettle corn. Watched a pie eating contest. She screamed on the hayride and made me laugh so hard I nearly pulled a muscle. Later that night, I found a note folded in her backpack. It was written in purple marker shaky letters. "Nana Grace is my best friend. She listens good. I hope she stays forever." I cried, quietly, in the kitchen. with the fridge humming and the night pushing against the windows. Not because I was sad, but because I finally believed it. I was staying, not hiding, not pretending, just living. That's when I realized the house wasn't the only thing rebuilding itself. I was too, piece by piece. And no one, no lawyer, no letter, no long-lost child was going to take that from me. A few days later, I was shelving books in the back corner of the library when Ruth Ann showed up again, clutching a newspaper clipping, like it was the last piece of a puzzle only she could see.
"Found this in the archives," she whispered, even though we were the only two people in the building. She smoothed out the yellowed paper on the front desk, her fingers trembling a little. "Tell me this doesn't give you chills." It was an article from 1969. Rosewood residents rebuilt after mysterious self-fire.
Self-fire. Ruth Ann tapped the edge. No official cause. No one ever saw smoke. Just one morning, everything inside was ash. But the frames stood. No rain, no fire trucks. And then a year later, it looked brand new. Town records say no permits were filed. No one ever saw the work done. I leaned in, reading the faded text under the glow of the desk lamp. The language was formal, almost apologetic, like the writer didn't believe what they were printing. At the bottom, scribbled in pen, was a name I hadn't seen in decades. D.M. Harris. Ruth Ann leaned back, arms folded.
"Diane, that's your middle name, right?"
I didn't answer. I didn't have to.
She gave me a long, slow look. Not accusatory, not even curious. Just patient. Like she was letting me decide whether I wanted to be real.
"I'm not going to ask," she said finally. "But if you ever want someone to talk to someone who also decided not to die the way people expected, we can grab coffee." And just like that, she left. I stood there for a long time, holding that newspaper clipping, heart pounding like the walls had started whispering.
When I walked home that evening, I passed Rosewood again.
This time, the porch light flicked on as I passed. Just a slow amber glow, as if the house was acknowledging me.
I kept walking. I didn't look back.
Because here's what I've come to understand. Not everything that returns from the past is meant to haunt you. Sometimes, it's just finishing what it started.
That night, I couldn't sleep. So I went into the bathroom, turned off the overhead light, and stood in front of the mirror with only the glow from the hallway behind me. And there it was. The mirror didn't reflect me.
It reflected the kitchen behind me.
But not my kitchen. It was my old kitchen in Savannah,
with the blue backsplash and the chipped mug by the sink. With the wedding photo still hung over the doorway and the stained glass rooster my mother gave me on the windowsill. I blinked, thinking it was a trick of the light, but it didn't change. I leaned in.
And still no me.
Just the room, frozen in time. The version of home they'd tried to erase. I backed away slowly, heart thumping in my ears, until the reflection blinked back to normal. And then I whispered the only thing that came to mind.
"I'm not going back."
The mirror didn't answer, but I think it heard me. The next morning, I taped a note to the inside of the bathroom cabinet. "If it happens again, breathe. You've already left once. You can do it again."
I didn't tell Hannah, or Rosie, or Ruth Ann.
Because I wasn't scared? Not really. It wasn't a warning. It was a memory.
And memories can't hurt you if you don't give them room to live.
Later that day, I helped Rosie write her first story.
She'd been watching me journal for weeks, asking little questions. What's that word mean? Why do you cross stuff out? Can I write one too? So we did it together. She called it The Mirror That Forgot to Reflect.
Her version had magic keys and a flying turtle named Mike, and a grandmother who could walk through walls but always came back in time for pancakes. She read it aloud at the next story circle at the library. Every kid clapped,
and I sat in the back, watching her beam, like the world had finally caught up to the way she saw herself.
Hannah slipped into the seat next to me halfway through. "She told me she wants to be a writer now," she said softly. "She already is," I replied. We didn't say anything else. We just sat there listening to Rosie tell her tale. And I thought about that mirror. How maybe it wasn't magic. Maybe it was just reminding me that I could visit the past, but I didn't have to stay there. Kind of like Rosewood. Kind of like me. At the end of the day, I walked home under a sky so pink, it looked like the world had been dipped in strawberry milk.
The air smelled like cinnamon and dirt. The good kind of dirt. The kind that makes things grow.
And in that moment, I wasn't Grace pretending to be someone else.
I was just a woman walking home knowing she'd made her own road. Not everyone gets that chance, but I did. And this time, I wasn't going to waste it.
The next morning, I opened the trailer door to find a padded envelope sitting on the step. No name, no return address. Just the same Georgia postmark I'd started to recognize from a dozen unopened letters.
But this one was heavier.
Inside was an iPad.
The old one, Luke's iPad.
The one I'd used to discover everything, the texts, the plans, the truth. Back when my hands still trembled just from holding it. There was a post-it note stuck to the screen.
Thought you might want this back, M.
I stared at it for a while, half expecting it to explode. Then I powered it on.
She hadn't wiped it.
Every message, every document, every draft email still sat there exactly where I'd left them. At first, I felt a stab of panic. Like the past had crawled in under the doorframe and was waiting for me with a smug smile. But as I scrolled through the old texts and passive-aggressive group chats, something strange happened. I didn't feel rage. I didn't even feel sadness. I felt distance, like I was reading someone else's mail. Messages written by people who no longer knew me, trying to manage a version of me that didn't exist anymore.
I closed it, slid the iPad back into the envelope, and buried it in the deepest drawer in the trailer. The one with old dish towels and that one mismatched sock I never found a partner for.
Then I went to the library and reshelved poetry books until the buzz in my bones calmed down. That afternoon, Rosie asked if she could come over and make science, which in her world meant mixing vinegar and baking soda in the bathtub until something foamed or exploded.
We wore goggles. We made a mess. We made memories.
Halfway through, she looked up at me with a streak of blue food coloring on her cheek and asked, "Do you miss your old life?"
I paused, then answered honestly, "Not anymore."
She considered that. "Did it miss you back?" I smiled. "I don't think so."
Later, while she was drawing dinosaurs that wore tiny glasses, I took out my journal and wrote one word across a fresh page. Unfound. Not missing. Not hiding. Unfound.
A choice. That evening, the wind changed. You ever notice how towns sound different depending on the wind?
Pine Grove in spring, it hums. Summer, it stretches.
But in fall, when the wind turns cold and slips through the gaps in the trees, it starts to whisper. It whispers memories you forgot you remembered. Around midnight, I heard a knock on the trailer door.
Not loud, not urgent.
Just steady.
3 soft taps.
I sat up in bed, heart racing. Not fear, just instinct. I didn't turn on the light. I pulled on my robe, slipped my feet into those awful fuzzy slippers Rosie had picked out from the dollar rack, and opened the door.
Nothing. No one. Just a small envelope tucked into the screen door.
Inside a letter.
This one wasn't typed.
It was handwritten.
From Sarah. Mom?
I'm sorry it took me this long to say this the right way. I kept trying to write letters that would undo what we did. But I can't. There's no fix. No shortcut. Just this. We were wrong. We were afraid of your grief. And instead of sitting in it with you, we tried to move past it without you. You deserved better.
If you never want to see me again, I understand. But if you ever change your mind, I'll be at that cafe on Route 6. The one with the lemon bars you used to love. Saturday at 10 a.m., I'll wait an hour. That's it.
Love.
Sarah.
I reread it twice. The part of me that used to beg for this kind of apology was quiet now. Like it had finally been heard. But even still, I didn't know.
I didn't know if I wanted to walk into a place where she might be wearing that hopeful look, like we could patch this up over coffee and a plate of lemon bars. So I didn't decide right away.
Instead, I slipped the letter into my notebook. Right after the word unfound.
Saturday came with frost on the grass. Rosie was spending the morning at the neighbor's something about glitter and glue and very big plans.
So I made tea, put on real pants, and sat at my little kitchen table staring at the clock. 9:10.
9:30. 9:41.
At 9:50, I stood up.
At 9:58, I stepped outside. And at 10:04, I walked past the cafe on Route 6. Didn't go in. Didn't stop.
But I looked through the window. She was there.
Hands wrapped around a coffee cup. Hair pulled back. Same cardigan from Vermont. She looked smaller, not weaker. just less sure.
Like she knew this wasn't going to be her victory lap. She saw me.
Stood up halfway.
I shook my head.
Not angrily.
Just gently. A soft no. Then I kept walking. And I think maybe that was the truest forgiveness I had to give. Not a second chance.
Not a hug.
Just a little mercy from across the glass. When I got home, I didn't cry. I didn't journal.
I turned on the old radio and played a Patsy Cline record Rosie found at the thrift store.
And I danced. By myself. In fuzzy slippers. With the wind pushing gently at the windows like it was proud of me, too.
The morning after I passed by the cafe, I woke up lighter. Not weightless. Not healed in the way people like to imagine where the sun shines through the curtains. And suddenly, everything bad just evaporates. No, not like that. More like I had finally set something down that I'd been carrying for so long, I didn't even realize how tired it had made me.
I made myself a slow breakfast. Eggs, toast, the last of the raspberry jam that Rosie liked to eat straight off the spoon when she thought I wasn't looking. I opened the window while I ate, and the air smelled like pine needles and someone's wood-burning stove down the hill. Later that afternoon, I opened the notebook again. The one with all the lies, all the truths, all the little breadcrumbs that led me out of one life and into another. I flipped to a fresh page and wrote, "You don't have to be angry to walk away. You can just go."
Then I underlined it twice. That day, I ran into Ruth Ann again at the library. She was checking out books on local folklore, her newest obsession. She asked me if I'd seen the latest update on the Rosewood house.
"They say someone's living there now," she whispered.
"No one knows who.
But the curtains are drawn, a car in the driveway.
The porch swings moving again."
She paused, then added, "Sometimes I think places like that attract the ones who need them most."
I didn't ask what she meant.
I think I already knew. Some places fix themselves so they can hold someone else's broken pieces.
And some people, we do the same.
I walked past Rosewood again that evening. Sure enough, the porch light was on. One of those old bulbs that flickers a little, like it can't quite decide whether to stay or leave. I stood at the gate for a while. I didn't feel fear, just familiarity. And for the first time, I stepped through.
Not far, just to the walkway.
There was a wind chime near the door now, silver tubes and tiny glass birds that sang when the wind nudged them. I swear for one moment I heard Mark's voice. Not words, not a message, just his laugh. That deep, quiet chuckle he used to let out when I said something halfway clever and halfway sarcastic.
I smiled, just a little.
Then turned and walked home. That night, Hannah and I sat on her porch while Rosie painted our fingernails with glitter polish so thick it would take a week to dry.
"You ever think about writing it all down?" Hannah asked gently.
I didn't need to ask what she meant.
"You mean the truth?" "Yeah, your truth."
I looked at the stars overhead. A dozen, maybe more. Scattered like someone had tossed a handful of diamonds across black velvet.
"Sometimes," I said, "but some stories are better whispered than published. Rosie's gonna want to know someday."
"I know," I said quietly. "And when she's ready, I'll tell her." Because that's what you do for the people who love you, right? You give them the full story. Not to burden them, but to show them what surviving looks like in real time. A few nights later, another letter came. This one from Megan again, but different this time. Shorter.
No apologies?
Just, "Mom, I don't expect anything, but I still make your apple pie every Thanksgiving. I tell them it's yours. That part of you always shows up even if you don't. Love." I folded the letter and slipped it between the pages of the journal. I didn't cry, but I did make a pie that night.
Same recipe, same crust, same feeling.
Just me and the scent of cinnamon and butter filling the trailer like it was trying to bring back something warm from the past. And as I pulled it from the oven, I thought maybe this is what memory is. Not something you chase, not something you hold on to like a grudge, but something that floats up in the smell of apples and cloves and reminds you you're still here. Later that week, Rosie asked me if I'd ever been famous. I laughed. "Why would you think that?" She shrugged. "One of the moms at school said you were in a video." I blinked. "What kind of video?" She didn't say, just that you were brave and kind of like a wizard. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding.
"Well," I said, "maybe once. A very long time ago." She smiled, satisfied. Cool, I hope I'm in a video someday. You already are, I said. You just don't know it yet. Because here's the truth, the most important stories aren't the ones that go viral. They're the ones that happen quietly, between pancakes and nail polish and porch swings that creak with every breeze. The ones that don't ask for attention. They just show up and stay. And that's what I had become, a story that stayed. The last frost came earlier than usual. One morning in late October, I woke up to a thin layer of ice across the windshield, tiny crystals clinging to the glass like lace. Pine Grove was slipping into winter slowly, gracefully, like a tired woman easing into a warm bath. I took that as a sign, a reminder, that endings don't have to be harsh. They can drift in gently, almost unnoticed, until you realize something is over, not because it broke, but because it settled. Rosie had started counting down the days until Christmas. Every morning she'd wake up, mark an X on the little calendar Hannah had taped to the fridge, and yell, "Only 53 days left." She'd asked me to help make decorations, cut out snowflakes, glittered pine cones, paper chains that stretched from her bedroom door to the bathroom mirror. She wanted the whole house to sparkle, and somehow, in helping her make it happen, something inside me softened in a way I hadn't felt in years. One afternoon, while hanging a particularly messy garland, she looked at me and asked, "Do you think everyone gets a second chance?" I paused. She was stringing cotton balls on yarn like they were pearls. "I think everyone gets a chance," I said. "Some people just don't recognize it when it arrives." She nodded, eyes squinting thoughtfully. "Well, I'm glad you found yours." "Me too, Rosie, me too." A week later, Hannah came into the library carrying a package, wrapped in brown paper, tied with twine. "No return address," she said, "but I think it's for you." Inside was a small photo album, handmade, leather-bound, stitched at the sides. On the first page in neat handwriting, it said, "Grace, so you never forget what you've built." The album was filled with photos from the last year. Pictures of me and Rosie at the fair, us baking, decorating, laughing on the pier. There was even one of me reading a book under a tree in the park, unaware the camera had found me. On the final page was a note. "We don't always get to choose our beginnings, but sometimes, if we're very lucky, we get to write our own endings." No signature. But I knew it was Megan, or maybe Sarah, or both. And for once, I didn't feel the need to figure it out. I slipped the album onto my shelf, between a collection of Frost poems and Rosie's favorite book about a pig in space. Later that night, I sat on my porch under a heavy blanket watching the stars. Rosie was asleep. Hannah was inside, folding laundry, humming something soft and familiar. And me, I was just there, still, present, not bracing for the next knock, not imagining someone would come to take it all away. Because they couldn't. They might try. They might write me out of the family tree, call me difficult, bitter, unforgiving, but they'd never again control how I lived. Because I'd already written the final chapter. I'd already chosen my ending. And it was this: a quiet town with cold winters and kind eyes. A trailer that smelled like cinnamon and old pages. A little girl who called me Nana like it was the only name I'd ever had. And a woman who for the first time in her life was enough for herself and no one else. In the distance, I heard the wind rustle the branches, shake the frost loose from the trees. And I whispered to no one in particular, "I'm not Grace because I'm hiding. I'm Grace because I arrived." Then I went inside, and I didn't look back. Some stories end with a bang, some with a heartbreak. Some are so quiet you don't even notice the last sentence when it slips past your eyes. But this one, this ends with peace. Not perfection, not closure in the way you might expect, but a kind of peace that only comes when you finally realize that you don't have to be everything to everyone. That surviving isn't the same thing as living, but both are worth honoring. Tonight, you've walked with me through fire and frost silence, and song betrayal, and something like forgiveness. Maybe parts of it felt familiar. Maybe it didn't. But if there's one truth I can leave with you, it's this. You get to decide who you are, no matter how long it takes. It doesn't matter what name is on your birth certificate or how many people chose to leave you behind when things got hard. What matters is what you build next.
What matters is that you choose softness not because the world is kind, but because you are.
So if you've been waiting for a sign to start over, let this be it.
You're allowed to change your name. You're allowed to walk away.
You're allowed to build a life out of scraps and silence and call it beautiful.
And if the world ever knocks asking for the version of you it abandoned,
Don't answer.
let them wonder.
You're not missing.
You're not hiding. You're just finally blissfully home.